We are so happy to have you back here again, or if it's your first time joining the session, we're happy to have you here for Winterlude. Welcome. This is an offering of Cormont music, and this session and all Winterlude sessions are our gift to the horn community. This evening session, Increasing Resonance and Capacity Through Aston Kinetics, is led by Amanda Skidmore, certified Aston-Patterning practitioner at the Health and Wellness Center on the University of Colorado Medical Campus in Denver, Colorado. I am your moderator, Nikki Labonte, Associate Operations Director of Kendall-Betts Horn Camp, acting principal horn of the Fort Worth Symphony, and Peter Kurau's most inefficient student. If you don't know what I'm talking about, head over to our YouTube page. Before we jump into the session, a few housekeeping items. So that we may be able to hear the presentation, we have muted all participants. Please, please, please stay muted for the duration of the session unless one of our presenters asks you to unmute. If you click on participants at the bottom of the screen, you should see a participant list pop up with your name at the top. If the name associated with your Zoom account is different from your own first and last name, please click the blue More button next to your name, select Rename, and enter your first and last name. If you click on Chat at the bottom of the screen, down here maybe somewhere, you should see the chat box appear. Comments posted in the chat are affected by the drop-down menu above the text box. Depending on your selection, your comments may be viewed by everyone or by individual participants. Each time that you enter a comment into the chat, double check your selection so that your comment is seen by your intended audience. Please use discretion, and please keep comments on topic with regard to the session. In addition, entering questions and comments into the chat box, you can also use the raise hand option, which is located in the reactions menu, to indicate that you'd like to speak with our presenters. This will be particularly useful during our Q&A portions. At the top right of your screen, hope I got it, otherwise I'm way off, you'll see the option to change between gallery view and speaker view. We recommend that you select speaker view while content is being presented and gallery view during question and answer portions of today's session. Finally, KBHC staff will be taking screenshots throughout the duration of our session today. If you would rather not have your image included in the screenshots, you may turn off your camera. If you keep your video on, you are agreeing to grant Kendall-Betts Horn Camp and Cormont Music permission to use images taken during Winterlude for any legal use. Your refusal to participate, however, will not affect your relationship with KBHC or Cormont Music in any way. And with that, I'm going to hand the session off to Amanda. Amanda, thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to have you.
It's my pleasure.
Looking forward to this.
I am so happy to be here with all of you. So I am going to try and cover a lot of information today. This is an experiential workshop, so I'd like for you to have your horn nearby and preferably a couple of towels and a pillow or two as well. I'm going to be giving you a chance to ask questions at a few different points during the session. So like Nikki said, you can go ahead and write your questions in the chat box and then she'll bring them up when it comes time. I very much welcome your questions if there's any confusion. You know, it's a little challenging doing this kind of work via Zoom. And so any way that I can help clarify what we're working on would be great to be able to offer that to you. So the other thing too is I really encourage you not to just sit and watch the computer, but I absolutely want you to participate because that's going to help you make sense of the information that I'm covering today. All right, so to start with that, let's stand up. So we're going to take on a few different postures just to be able to contrast them with one another. So I want you to first start with, and this is not related to your horn playing right now, okay? We aren't going to pick up the horn until probably at least 20 or 25 minutes in, because I want you to first be able to start to pay more attention to your body in and of itself. When we add the horn in, then we can, you know, start to think about things that are related to playing, and I want you to be very body focused for the time being. But so starting with standing, I want you to stand with your feet apart, so pretty wide. Weight on the heels. Take a breath. See where it's easy to breathe and where it's harder. So I want you to specifically think about 3 areas: your lower back, the sides of your rib cage and your upper chest. So feet apart, weight in the heels, take a breath. Where is it easy? Where is it hard? Rotate your head from side to side. See if it's easier to one side than the other. Now do a free buzz just to be able to pay attention to how this might affect your resonance. So take a deep breath and then buzz. Okay, variation 2. Stand, you can have your feet maybe a little bit closer together. This part doesn't really matter so much, but I want you to really stand up tall. So if you're going, I am putting on my best posture, this is the time I want you to do that. So chest really open, shoulders back as tall as you can. Take a breath. Notice where it's easy, where it's harder. Rotate your head from side to side. Do that free buzz again. Okay, this time, cock your hip to one side. Take a breath. Do you notice how that changes things a lot when you're up here and this side is longer? So I'm going to face this way so you can see me. I take a breath. Turn my head. Do the free buzz. Now, one last option here. Feet directly underneath you. So when a lot of times when people think hip width apart, they think the outside of their hips. I want you to think about where your upper leg goes into the pelvis. So right here, do you notice how my feet are just directly underneath that area? Then I am not going to pull myself up, but I'm just going to let myself relax on top of my pelvis and let the weight go a little bit more over my whole foot. Take a breath. Where is it easy? Is it harder in any places? Rotate your head. Free buzz. And now I want you to go back to the one that feels the most constricted. For me, it's this pulled up position. And feel how different that is from just letting your rib cage relax. Okay, so now you can go ahead and sit back down. That, in essence, is what we're going to talk about today, about how to balance our weight over our bases of support so our body doesn't have to work as hard. When we're holding ourselves up or we're being pushed back through our weight being just in the heels, then that throws off the support that we can get through our rib cage. It doesn't allow us to balance the weight of the horn down through our body. This is important not just for people who play off of the leg, but also for people who play on the leg. Let me show you. So here's my creepy little skeleton guy. What I want you to be able to think about is what the rib cage does. And the rib cage, when it's in a relaxed position, should be able to expand in all three directions. So we don't want to just breathe into our upper chest or into our stomach, but the sides of our rib cage should be able to expand. We should be able to feel that expansion, at least somewhat, into our lower back. The other thing about having a rib cage that's in that relaxed position is it gives a better base of support for the shoulder girdle. So we don't have to hold our shoulders in place, and we don't have to hold the weight of our horn in the shoulders. The shoulders relax on top of the rib cage. The weight of the horn relaxes into that system. Again, while that part is very important for people playing off the leg, it also is really important for people playing on the leg. And when you start to think about your shoulder girdle, I want you to think not just about the back, but about the front. So the clavicle here is part of the shoulder girdle. So it's like a yoke that goes to the front and the back of the rib cage. When our bodies are able to be in a more relaxed position, it allows us to breathe more easily, to more fully utilize our lung capacity, and it helps improve our resonance. So we're first going to look at this position in standing, in sitting, and that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time today because it's just more complicated than standing. The ideas will still transfer to standing. If I have time, we're going to go over a little bit of that at the end. But first, I want you to just put your horn aside, sit in a chair that is as similar as you can get to the one that you're going to practice or perform in, because I want you to be able to play with making some adjustments that we're going to talk about. And we'll first look at how to sit in the chair itself, then we're going to bring in the horn. And I'm going to give you at least 2 different times to be able to ask questions first before we even bring the horn in, I think, too. Okay, I'm going to back my chair up so you can see my whole body, and we're going to get started with some pre-test questions. You have a handout with all of those pre-test questions that you can refer to later. I think that Nikki may put them in the chat box as well. And let's see, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm moving my chair back so you can see my whole body. Now, the reason that I want you to ask these pre-test questions of yourself is so you know where you're starting from. And when you start to make any changes, you have something to compare it to. Because often when we're looking at making adjustments to our body usage, that new place is just going to feel weird because we aren't used to it. It's just not comfortable. It's not familiar. And when you can start to take a more objective view of, you know, this may feel different to me, but I know that it allows my rib cage to expand more in this direction, or I realize that it gives me a larger range of motion, or it makes my buzzing easier, then you have something that you can go, okay, I know that this feels a little odd, but I recognize that that oddness may just be from it's what I'm used to. So the pre-test is going to give you this comparison when you start to make changes, okay? So first, and when you're doing a pre-test, don't sit in your best possible way, sit in the way you normally play. So if the way you normally play is this is how I want you to do the pre-test. If you normally play like this, same thing, all right? But don't worry about your hand position right now, just look at your body. So first pre-test question, are your feet flat on the floor? Are they tucked behind you? Are they crossed? Do you have them, you know, behind the chair? Is your tailbone tucked underneath you, or is it jutting out from behind you? So if you had a tail, would you be able to wag it? Can you feel your weight into both your pelvis and your feet? Or is it really centered in more in one area than the other? Going back to one of those original things that we experimented with, take a breath and see if you can expand your rib cage into your back, your sides, and your upper chest. Where does the breath move most easily? And where does it feel a little bit more constricted? Again, remember, there is no right or wrong here. This is just observations that you're making to be able to compare possible changes to, okay? Turn your head to the left and the right. Is it easier to one direction than the other? As you're sitting here, so let yourself kind of wiggle into place. Notice Does your chin angle up? Does it go down? Or is it level? And when you look ahead, where does your gaze tend to rest? Does it tend to rest high, about at the horizon, or does it rest low? All right. So those are the first pre-test questions we have. We're now going to start working on giving you some options about how to use your body differently. The first way to do that is looking at how we sit in a chair. Now, this chair is almost neutral, meaning it's almost level, but it does slope back a little bit to the back of the chair. In Aston Kinetics, one of the things that we really focus on is this base of support. When we're sitting, our base of support are our feet and our sits bones. So it's really important that we be able to sit directly on top of the sits bones. I can do that in this chair because I'm sitting forward. If I sit back, it's really hard. Now, let me show you too. I'm going to do another close-up. Okay, my skeleton guy. These are the sits bones right here. Okay. And when we're tucked under, it tends to be, here, he's going to do a little advanced yoga move. When we're tucked under, it tends to be rolled down. When we're in extension, it's more this direction. Okay. So we're going to get directly on top of those sits bones. But if the chair slopes back, that can be really hard to do. And almost every orchestral chair slopes back a little bit. So I'm just going to use a towel here. And that makes it far easier for me to sit directly on top of my sits bones. Do you notice how if I don't have that, it just sends me back in the chair? And that makes me work harder than I need to sit upright. And then that distracts from how I can use my body while I'm playing. I don't want to have to do any extra work if I don't need to. So go ahead and experiment with that. See if you have that little bit of decline or a scoop out. If you are sitting in an office chair, odds are you probably have a pretty big scoop out in your chair. See if you can fill that to where you can make it at least level and maybe even a little bit higher. So when I work with people privately, we almost always end up with their hips being at least slightly higher than their knees. You can also use, cushions that are made for this. That brings me up even a little bit higher, and that's much more comfortable for me. Okay, so first experiment with that with your chair. I'll give you a few seconds, and then we're going to move on. And I'm creepily watching some of you in the video to see. Okay. So when we're set up to where our hips are a bit higher than our knees, I'm going to move this so you can see my pelvis a little better. Then it's going to make it easier for us to get directly on top of the sits bones. So there are a couple of ways that you can work with this. You can put your hands on either side of your pelvis, like this. Or you can just keep them by your side. So we're going to take a deep breath and then roll your thumbs back, and that rolls your pelvis back. And then you can push on the front of your hands and roll your pelvis forward. Okay, do that again. Push on your thumbs, and that rolls your pelvis underneath you. This is also a really nice stretch for the lower back. Push the front of your hands, you come back forward and then land somewhere between the two. That's one option of getting on top of the sits bones. The other, you can put your hands underneath your pelvis so you're touching those bones. I usually sing Getting to Know You during this portion when I'm doing an in-person masterclass. So anyway, but I won't do that to all of you now, but go ahead and put your hands underneath your sits bones and do that same rolling back. And when you roll back, you can feel the front part of the sits bones. Roll forward, and then you can feel more of the back. So as you're rolling over your sits bones, you can feel it, your hands touch a different portion of that bone, okay? And then you want to end up where you're fairly equal front to back, okay? So you're neither tucked down nor extended, but somewhere to where you can start to rock. And I'll turn so you can see me. Then I can rock from sits bone to sits bone, okay? So to help us keep track of how this actually feels in our body, take those cushions out. And can you feel the difference? For me, this is really awful. I don't like it at all. There's no way I could actually play. I have to sit this far forward. So, but can you feel that if you have a chair that's more similar to mine, that it can be very hard to sit on top of the sits bones when the chair is pushing you back, okay? So go ahead and put that cushion back. All right. So now that you're on top of your sits bones, I'm going to take you through a movement exercise called arcing. And arcing is, it's really wonderful for many different ways. The first reason that we're going to be doing it is it helps take that finding the neutral front to back all the way up your spine. So it helps set you up to be in a position that isn't held, okay? Secondly, it's really nice to be able to stretch the spine when you are in the middle of a long rehearsal. And third, it helps you determine the balanced neutral posture for your body for that day. So in Aston Kinetics, this is how we, through this arcing exercise, is how we come to our most supported neutral position. And then let's say if I want to sit here, I would take myself through arcing. And then if I wanted to have something behind my back, I would get into that neutral position. And then I would put the pillow there to support me, okay? But coming to neutral through this arcing is a really different sensation than pulling yourself up. I'll show you. So most important, you want to be on top of your sits bones to start. Take a deep breath. Let your pelvis roll underneath you. Then your chest comes down, your head nods down. I'm in a bit of a C curve right now. I keep myself in the C curve and I just hinge forward over my hips. So that brings my weight more into my feet. All right. I bring my hands halfway up my thighs. I push into my feet, lightly into my hands, extend up, and then I relax somewhere in between the two. So it's the relaxing down that takes me into my neutral position. And this is the position that I would begin playing from. Lest you think that this is a whole choreography that you have to go through when you're used to this movement in your body. If I were saying a rehearsal, this would be my arcing. And no one really sees it. And it feels really yummy, but my body knows what it's doing. I don't have to make it very big. But right now we're going to make the movement quite large just to make it easier for you to feel. Okay, let's go through that a couple of times together. So hips higher than your knees, as much as you can be directly on top of your sits bones. Take a deep breath to start. Pelvis rolls underneath you. Chest comes down, head nods down. Keep yourself in the C curve, hip hinge forward. Now the weight is more in my heels. I put my hands about halfway up my thighs, push into my feet, into my hands, and then I relax into neutral. When you're here, take that breath. And for me, this is about as easy of an inhalation as I can get when I'm in this position. Because here, I'm not holding myself up. I'm relaxing into the support that my body gives me, okay? Take out any support that you use. Go back to sitting the way that you normally sit. And what's different? Are there some things that are easier? Are there some things that are more challenging? Go back to the new. Directly on top of your sits bones. Let's go through the arcing again. Deep breath. Pelvis rolls underneath with the exhale. Chest comes down, head nods down a little bit. Notice that my head doesn't collapse. My head is following more in the line of the rest of my spine. I keep myself in the C curve. I transfer my weight forward, feel the weight into my feet. Hands go here. I push into my feet, into my hands as I inhale. Shoulders slide down. And then I relax somewhere in between the two. So from here, let yourself rock back and forward. And can you feel to where you can access the weight bearing into your feet a little bit more too? Okay. At this point, I'm going to pause, take some questions. We are going to address modifications for sitting with the horn on your leg next. Okay, so don't worry about that. All right, so some questions before we move on to the next bit.
Yes. So David Mills Rittman has a question. Thoughts on taller individuals? My knees are if I raise I'm way up there.
Wait, can you repeat? When I said yeah, then I totally missed the rest of what you were saying.
So thoughts on taller individuals. My knees are typically higher than my hips. If I raise the chair level, then I'm way up there.
Okay. So first of all, I feel for you being on the other end of that spectrum and have worked with those of you who have that problem, although I can't quite conceive of it myself, but it's challenging. So there are a few different things you can do. If you're sitting in the very back row and it's okay to raise yourself up, I would encourage you to do so. I mean, that's a perfect world scenario. I use a cushion with taller people. This is about the thickest cushion that we have. And you can do something like this or multiple towels just to raise you up some, but it's, wouldn't get you really, really high. But that's still probably not enough for you. So what you want to do, again, this isn't a perfect world scenario, but for the real world scenario, putting your feet further out is going to allow you to get on top of your sits bones more easily. Because as long as you're up here, can you see how it's tipping me under? And putting yourself in this position to where you're stretching out more. But the challenge is you want to still see if you can bring your weight into your feet. Okay, so you might still need to have a little something here, especially if the chair slopes back. Does that help at all?
I think so. I think it probably helps.
Okay. All right, next.
You want to do one more?
Let's do two more and then see if anyone has any specific questions about, what we've covered thus far.
You bet. JG wants to know, can you expand on the differences between being seated in a chair and being seated versus a stool?
Well, it's really pretty much the same thing. Except, well, on a stool, you don't have the chair, you don't have the back of the chair to be able to use. With the stool, you generally are raised up higher, so you have not as wide of a base of support. But that's really the only difference. The same rules apply that you want to be able to be directly on top of your sits bones, that you want to be able to feel the weight into your feet. I generally actually sit on a stool when I very occasionally practice nowadays, but I sit on a stool when I work on my computer, just because it's comfortable for me and how I use my body. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as a chair, except you don't have the back to worry about. If the stool is scooped out towards the back, you'd want to address that in the same way that you would a chair. Okay, one more.
Yeah, and this might lead into the next thing that you're going to talk about. Leah
Okay.
wants to know, I put my right foot higher to hold my horn. How does this change recommendations?
Leah, what a beautiful segue. And Nikki, good. Yes, so that's actually what we're getting to right now. Okay. And I have various little supports to experiment with sitting with your right leg up. So the first thing, and the reason why I wanted you to get to experiment with this without the horn, is to be able to feel what it's like when you have that base of support steadily on both sides of your sits bones and into both feet. We want to try and replicate that as much as possible when you start to put the leg up. Okay, so, and I recommend experimenting with different heights. You can use a guitar, whatever they call those things.
Those
You know,
pedal stands.
yeah, I don't love them. I actually prefer just books, but you can give that a try just because you can adjust it. What you want to pay attention to, and what I will advocate all day for in Aston Kinetics, is that your body is never going to be exactly the same at all times. The chairs that you're going to sit in aren't going to be exactly the same. The shoes that you wear are going to change the relationship and the space in between you and your instrument. So the more that you can use these self cues, these questions about, okay, what is this position doing to my breathing through my rib cage? How is it affecting my weight bearing? That's going to allow you to make modifications. So that said, when we play, let me scoot back so you can see my whole body. Okay. So when I am in this position, I'm going to exaggerate this. I'll put this up so you can see a little bit better. This is the position that it tends to want to put me into. All right. So and this is for my body, I would use a little extra support underneath the left side. And then can you see how that makes me more even? Now, something else that's interesting too, when we're looking at a seated position for someone who plays on their leg, the positioning of their leg or the positioning of their foot is more important as to, if it's right in front of you or if it's to the side, because the rest of your body needs to mirror that. So when someone plays off their leg, they may be able to comfortably sit with their feet further apart. If you're playing on your leg, you may need to have your left foot more to your midline to be able to balance out how far to the right your bell leg has to go. Okay, So what you want to do in this position, and for those of you who play on your leg, go ahead and get out whatever you tend to use. And if you just prop up your leg, let's experiment with that too. So if you prop up your leg, notice what that does to your pelvis. Can you weight bear as evenly that way? How does that affect your breathing? Without this support. Okay. Your breath is a very good friend for you here in helping you make decisions about small modifications. And it's better to just use a little bit of extra support than too much. And it may need to change from day to day as well. Okay. And as you're looking at making any changes, rather than trying 5 different things, I would highly encourage you and pretty much, plead and insist that when you're looking at making changes, that you only compare one thing at a time. So like when you go to an optometrist and they're looking at lenses for you and they go, do you like A? Do you like B? Do you like A? Do you like C? Do you like A? Do you like A? Do you like D? That kind of thing. Okay. The reason that they keep going back and forth to the same one is for you to be able to be clear in the differences. So if you're looking at using, this many books, if you're looking at doing 3 variations, only try 2 variations at once, decide which one works best for you, then try another one. So only compare 2 things at a time. All right. The other thing when you're looking at playing on your leg that I want you to pay attention to is see how high your foot has to be. And you may have it a little higher than you need or a little lower. So if you can mock up where you would want your horn to be, regardless of your leg position, and then match your leg to the position that your horn needs. For instance, this puts me right there. This puts me a little lower, and that tends to throw my rib cage off. It compresses me on the right side. Okay, let me answer a few more questions with regards to the seated position for people who play on their leg, and then we're going to move on to the next thing.
You bet. Hot topic in the comments right now is the idea of bell rests. Instead of propping your leg out, some people are talking about, using one of those bell rests or bell radios on their horn. You have thoughts about that, about how to incorporate that into the setup you're talking about?
Yeah. The one thing, so I think that it's a great idea. The one thing I don't know as much about them, and people can answer, do they have different heights that the bell rest? I think they do.
Yeah, I think so. I think some of them are adjustable or some of them are customizable. So you can kind of raise it to whichever height you need.
Yep. So really you're applying the same idea that you would in the books to the little bell lip thing. So you want to be able to have the lip, let's say that, take this out. So let's say that this is where my horn wants to be. And then I would have a lip underneath it to take me up to that level. In a perfect world, I know this may not be possible, but in a perfect world, I would have a few different options available. Because can you imagine that if you're in a lower chair, you may not need to have the same degree of lip, or if you're in a higher chair, in a higher stool, you may need something a little bit deeper. Again, I realize that may not be possible, but as much as we allow ourselves the opportunity to modify things based upon the situation that we find ourselves in, rather than just one option, that's a really good thing. The other thing to pay attention to when you're using those lips is you still have to often turn your leg out a little bit more than someone who plays off their leg, and you might need to make adjustments in your left leg, and you might still need to make a few adjustments underneath your sits bones. So you really want to be able to pay attention to how does this position that I'm taking on for the instrument, how does that affect my weight bearing into my sits bones and into my feet? And then start looking at making small adjustments. And again, little hand towels like this are a really good way to be able to experiment with that. But first of all, making sure that the chair itself isn't throwing you back. Okay, one more and then we'll go on. Oh gee, time is fast.
Well, this is a short one. Steve wants to know, where can we get a cushion like yours?
These are designed by Judith Aston, my teacher, the person who formulated this work, and they're on her website. There's a link to her website from my website. I bet I can give it to you and you can put them up too. There are tons of different cushions. They're designed to be able to use by people for a lot of different needs. So, we have stuff like the triangles and then more of the thick ones. What's really helpful though is to first play with using the towels and see what is most helpful for you, and then you can order a cushion after that. But towels alone can be really great in the meantime. Okay. Anything else pressing before we go on?
I just I found that link to the seat wedges on the Aston Kinetics website, and I just shared that in the chat. So you're good to go.
She's so fast. Very impressive. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm going to move these things out of the way. Now, so I think I've probably rammed home how important the sits bones are. The other thing that's really important when you're sitting are your feet, because you want to be able to have support for the front dimension of your body, because that's where really all of the weight of the horn is. So I encourage you, do the arcing exercise. The arcing exercise is in a handout that I gave all of you. But you want to be able to feel that support front to back, because this is where your horn is. Your horn isn't behind you. So let's go ahead and pick up our instruments, put them in our laps. We're going to do the arcing exercise, keeping your horn on your lap. Take a deep breath. Pelvis rolls underneath you. Chest comes down, head nods down a little bit. Transfer your weight forward. Push into your feet as you inhale. Chest comes up, head comes up, and then relax. Okay, now rock from your sits bones to your feet, from your feet to sits bones, back and forth. You can do this and scare people away if you hum a really creepy song. Now, let's look at utilizing the full body to pick up the horn. So, and this will go if you play on your leg or if you don't too. So transfer your weight forward. So pushing off of your sits bones to your feet, push off of your feet, bring the horn up, settle it into your body. So when you settle it into your body, for those of you who play on your leg, this is where you would settle it to the place that you need for it to be. Okay, let's do that again. Transfer your weight to your feet, push off of your feet, bring the horn up and relax. Take a breath. Put your horn back down. Take any supports out. My body is unhappy. Bring your horn up to play. I mean, can you see? I kind of look awful. I look like a golem. Okay, but here I'm wrapping myself around the instrument. Here, I'm bringing the instrument into my body. And I'm not working hard. to do this. Now, of course, granted, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, so my body is used to this position. As you start to experiment with using your body differently, play with it for a little bit and then go back to your old way. You're going to be using your muscles differently. It's going to be more balanced, but that doesn't mean that it's not new. So your body is going to feel a little sore as you're starting to experiment with it, with a new positioning. If you play with this new positioning just for a couple of minutes at a time, it will allow your body to accommodate the changes that you're asking of it. And it will also give you the contrast of this new, more supported variation to your older, harder variation. The older will feel kind of sucky, which will reinforce you to keep doing the new. So it actually is a win-win on many different sides. It also will help you improve your body awareness by having this contrast. And as much as we horn players tend to be overachievers, this is not an area where being an overachiever is helpful. If you try and hold this position for a long time, then it also is going to become tension filled. And we just don't want that much tension in our horn playing. But speaking of tension too, that's also a really great way to be able to, well, arcing is a really great way to be able to start to dissipate that. So if you feel yourself going on hold, you can do a tiny arcing just to let your body settle back in. Okay, so again, to review this, and I'm going to face you now, utilizing the full body to be able to bring the horn up to play, settle yourself over your sits bones, transfer the weight forward, push off of your feet, horn comes up, and you relax down. So it almost is, I go up, back, relax somewhere in between the two. For those of you who play on your leg, and this leg is sitting further out, it may be more of a transfer to the right, push up and settle. Okay. Something that I did with my my young horn students a long time ago, we would do a transferring from side to side. And that actually feels really nice to bring the horn up to play. Okay. Okay, more questions here, and then we're going to look just a tiny little bit at standing.
You bet. All right. Well, we've got a question about standing, but I'll hold off.
Okay.
Wants to know, how can you best manage getting tired holding the horn up? If we're holding the horn off our leg, how do we manage, like when we start to get tired, how do we manage that?
So this is where being able to utilize your base of support is very helpful. When I am balanced front to back from my sits bones to my feet, my rib cage, here, let me get my skeleton so you can visualize this. So I'm balanced front to back, and then I'll move up here. Then the rib cage is relaxed in its full dimension. Then the shoulder girdle can relax on top of the rib cage. And then the horn has more substance to feed into rather than being held up from the shoulders. So being able to have that push off and then letting the horn settle is really helpful. That number one. If you play off of your leg, having a flipper can be very helpful. Where it's positioned is really important. I encourage people to position it in the meat of their hand rather than on the knuckles, because if it's on, here, I'll get closer again. If it's on the knuckles, then your hand can wrap around and you end up still working really hard into the arm. If it's more in the meat, then there's something for it to weigh down into. But it's really important to take the time to figure out the right fit for your body. Let's see, and then the last thing, when you have any time, just even if it's a few bars right into your music that you can rest. And this is a great time actually to do the tiny little arcing and just settle into your body. And that gives your muscles just a few seconds of rest. And this has been an interesting thing. I've been working with medical professionals and who are doing, 4 to 8 hour long surgeries, and micro breaks are really important for them too. They use their bodies in a very similar way to how we use our bodies. And you can't stop, the marathon surgery or the marathon performance, but you can have, 30 seconds, and you just need to be very conscious about how you use those 30 seconds. Okay, one more question, then we'll do standing real quick.
I mean, if you want to go right into standing, I can hold the other questions until the end.
Okay, let's do that. All right, so like I warned you, we were going to spend the majority of our time on sitting. So I'm just going to give you a little taste of how you translate this into standing. When you're standing, you still have the 4 bases of support, but it's your heels and the balls of your feet. So you have the 2 heels, the 2 balls of the feet. That's really important because you want to be able to utilize the whole foot to support you, because can you imagine that if you're back on your heels, that doesn't give support for the front of your body or the instrument, and it tends to bring a lot more tension into the neck as well. So weight over the whole foot, knees soft. Soft meaning that they can tighten and they can loosen. They just aren't held in any one position. And then the same place that you end up at the end of the seated arcing exercise, to where your weight is, or to where your length is fairly equal front to back through your torso. So in this position, I really think about letting my chest relax. And then the weight settles into that yoke of support through my shoulder girdle and then down into the rib cage. And this is where you can really tell a difference. If you're playing and you're on your heels, this is so much harder than weight over the whole foot and then letting the front and the back of the torso be fairly equal in length. Now, as far as position of your feet, that's a very personal thing that also has to do with the rotations that you might have through your pelvis. Sometimes having one leg slightly turned out may feel great. Sometimes having the other leg slightly turned out may feel great. So don't settle in and say, this is the way I have to stand all of the time, period. I do encourage you, though, to stand with your feet fairly close together. When you start to, can you see, if I go here, then my pelvis automatically goes forward. And if we're starting to think about that base of support through the rib cage, I don't get to have that base of support anymore because my pelvis is forward, my rib cage is back, and then my horn is here. Okay, so your feet more directly underneath you will allow you to have that base of support more evenly through your foot and through the front and back of your spine. And then from that point, you can turn out a little bit. Okay. The other thing to pay attention to for people who play off of their leg in sitting or in standing, what I see a lot of times is people have their shoulder or their arm pulled in. If your shoulder girdle is able to relax on top of your pelvis, then your arms pretty much hang. They don't get pulled in like this. Okay. So that's my little introduction to standing. Oh, and then for people who are playing wearing heels, you have even a smaller base of support when you're in heels because you're effectively shortening your foot. So it's just a little bit harder yet. Not that you aren't able to do it, but you don't want to end up back on your heels even more when you're or back, on your heels and heels. Okay. All right. So that's my little intro to standing. We have about 5 minutes. Okay. Questions.
You got it. Ryan wants to know any books that you'd recommend. I already went on the Aston Kinetics site. I have a link that I can send everyone, but I just want to know, do you recommend anything, any specific thing on that website? Do you use other resources not on that website?
Judith Aston and I did a video series a little while back, and I don't think it's up anymore. There is actually, I have it down here. There's one book that's written for the layperson, and I'm not sure if Judith has it on that side. I usually have one down here in my office, and I do not see it in front of me. It's a really small book, and I can
the names of them if you'd like. I've got
go ahead.
Moving Beyond Posture. Is that the name of it? Maybe. No.
Yes. Does it have a little yellow?
Yes, it does.
That's it.
I will send you guys.
That would be the book. And then the other books are more for body workers and movement therapists.
Awesome. Very cool. Great. Let me pull up my questions again. All right, Michael wants to know, what if you play with the lead pipe kind of more at a straight angle? Should one consider adjusting the angle by changing the brace position and ergonomics of the horn?
I would not want to make any comments on that unless I saw you. Because so is that happen? So my question would be, is the lead pipe going out like that because of the way that you have your arm positioned? Like what was it that led to that positioning of the horn? Because we would want to address that rather than just say, okay, well, go ahead and lower your horn. But then if your shoulder is still kind of stuck in an upward position, then that won't be helpful for you. So I'm sorry, I hesitate to answer without being able to see a picture of you.
Very fair, very fair. It's very hard to receive questions without being able to see everyone. That is really all the time we have, but it has been amazing and so enlightening to get to hear you talk and share these thoughts. And I think a lot of us kind of fall into a way of holding the horn that we don't often take a moment to consider. So this has been really enlightening to sit for a second and think about, how am I holding the horn? Could I be holding the horn in a way that's really going to benefit me? And this has really been a great insight into that.
Well, I'm glad. Well, and I know we have to go, but I think if you all can experiment with this idea of, I can increase my resonance and not work as hard, and it can be a really fun thing to experiment with, and there's no right or wrong. Our bodies are all very different, and just ask yourself these questions of, I'm curious, and then see where that leads you. And remember that when you're looking to make changes, that you want to be able to only compare two things at once. Otherwise, you can just become very, very confused. And then when you do make changes, don't try and hold that position all the time. Go back to your old, give your muscles a break, and it will also improve your body awareness.
Awesome. Really great. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Oh, yeah. And thank you all for attending this session of Winterlude. Sorry. Thank you for attending this session of Winterlude to Unwind and Innovate. Brought to you by Cormont Music as our gift to the horn community. You guys, be sure to check out the Flipgrid using the link that Julie's about to provide you in the chat. And you'll find that link in this morning's email too. This Flipgrid discussion is awesome. It is a way to kind of build community, allow yourself to play and just have fun and put something out there. We really hope you're going to take advantage of it. We had a lot of people participate this morning. We've kind of had a little afternoon slump. I get it. You guys got to get some more caffeine in you or something. But really check it out. It's a lot of fun. Go give the videos over there some support. I have a video over there. Lots of people have really great videos. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely check it out. Join us later today at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Composing to Enhance Practice and Create Anew. What a great title. Featuring Dr. James Nagus, lecturer of horn at the University of Georgia, hornist with the Georgia Brass Quintet, and one of the most actively commissioned and recorded composers for horn music today. You can subscribe to our YouTube page by searching for Kendall Betts Horn Camp. And you can also find us on Facebook using @KB Horncamp and Instagram using @official_KBHC. We love it when you post to social media. Lots of people have been posting to social media with that hashtag KBHC Winterlude. It's awesome. I love to see it. We absolutely love getting to see how you're enjoying this experience and what you're loving about this weekend. So please post over there for us. We just love interacting with you, even if it's just through that little social media window. Of course, also, please visit us at www.horncamp.org for more information about our online and in-person offerings. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you very soon, and have a great little break before our last session. Bye.